Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature, enhancing your smartphone photography, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader, Richard de Gavea. It is a pleasure as always, Richard. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you to you all for tuning in. It's a nice audience coming in this evening, which is exciting. And we're obviously going to talk about a bit of photography that is less professional and more in our pockets. We all have smartphones. We carry these things around with us. The newer they get, the further along they get, the better these cameras become. And we can capture some incredible images. It is very difficult to pack a big, bulky digital DSLR or mirrorless or bridge camera in your pocket. So having a cell phone with you is a major part of it. So what I would like to start off with is the basics. And if you've watched any other photographic tutorials and webinars that I've done, we always break this down into what life is here. So what is photography? So photography, that question will pervade forever, because if you can understand the term photography, you can start to manipulate and make your images. So you're not just pushing a button to take a photo. We want to make photographs. So photo, if we break the word down into its two sections or two syllables, we get photo, which means light, and graphy, to draw or paint with light. So we're painting with light. We're trying to capture images that show the dramatic nature of what we're seeing. And on a lot of the trips that we have, we get to do this and get to be part of incredible places, see incredible things. So we want to be able to utilize these things to the fullest. So the next question you have to ask yourself is, what story are you trying to tell? This is a very important point, because again, I go back to, we're not taking photographs, we're making photographs. So here's a photo taken on the phone. All of the photos that you'll see in this presentation were taken on a phone. And this was in the New York subway. I was waiting on the deck for one of the trains to come in, and I saw a scene on the other side of the platform that just really told a lot of things. Because of the low light, the lady over here was moving along, so she got blurred. This lady was sitting, and basically what I've done and what I utilized was the rule of thirds to break down and create different stories. So each one of the blocks has a story of its own. The whole picture has a different story. So when you're picking up a camera, it's not just about hitting the button. It's about trying to frame things, trying to put things in a way that people will look at them and really feel the moment down there. Here's another image. We went on a family trip to Portugal before COVID, as you can see, because there's no masks involved. And we were in this beautiful plaza, like a open square area in Lisbon. And I wanted to tell a story of what this was all about. So the little boy with his big hat on, the lady cruising on her bike, and again, the slow shutter speed helped to show her movement. I very purposely put the Portuguese flag up in the top corner here on the rule of thirds, on the hotspot, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But the story is telling more than just taking a photo or the plaza itself. I was trying to get elements of what I was experiencing into that photograph. So next time you look through that, look at that screen, think about the different elements. Again, my son Josh with a lollipop, and we were at an aquarium, and using different forms, and I'll show you how to manipulate the light. I utilized underexposing to paint with light. So here you can see the sunshine coming in through the water, shining down towards him, almost like the heavens opening and the angels singing and everything going on. I darkened him down so that this would pop the sunlight would pop, but he would become a silhouette. And it's telling the story of that enamored child with his sweet in one hand, looking out at something wondrous. So think about the stories you want to be able to tell. So we have very different things that we need to set up on a camera and on our different smartphones in order to do it. I'm using an iPhone, but pretty much every single one of the functions we're going to talk about will go across all of these different brands. So let me open up. We're going to be hopping between screens quite a bit, so I want you to follow suit as we're going along. So here is my phone screen. We have me, hi, and we are going to start looking at different parts of this. There's a little button up at the top here that means live photo. And what live photo does effectively is it looks at the photograph and it videos a section, and you can then choose a point within that section where you'll be able to record. So I'm going to switch this on. This is the little curly button up at the top here. I'll switch that on. Now I can't switch it on the computer. That was not my sharpest moment. And I'm going to move and take a photo. So effectively, if we look at the photo and I hold down, you will see that the photo can be, that's the initial photo, but if I hold down, it's recorded a whole section behind it. Now, that might seem like a great idea to use in the greater sense of things. For me, I don't think it's the greatest. The reason is because it then comes up as a photo and a video file. So I'm taking up space. And secondly, it's lowering the quality of what photo I'm taking. So I switch that live view off. Again, that's that little circular button up at the top there. Next, we have HDR. HDR means high dynamic range, high dynamic range. Effectively, what the camera is doing is taking 2 images or 3 images or 4 images. With the smartphones, it's 2 images, and it will choose the best lit areas. So there's nothing that's too light or too dark, and it will replace those too light and too dark areas with the correctly balanced one. And what that does is it creates a very nice even image across the board. Now, I generally switch that off. If we go into our settings and camera, I'm jumping ahead of us here because I, again, have a different screen. I've put Smart HDR on here. I was fiddling with this earlier, but effectively now I have a button up in the top corner here that says HDR. I can either switch that off or switch that on. Makes no difference. HDR probably will give you a better image quality as we're going along, just because of the fact that it's working out that exposure for you. But also it might slow things down in terms of you get a blur on an animal or something like that. So I generally leave that off again, unless it's a specific situation like a sunset where I want to fiddle with that. High dynamic range can have a very big effect where it looks a little off and the image doesn't look as great as what it could. So it almost looks like areas are oversaturated, too much color, or unnatural in their way, and I'd prefer to edit them myself in order to get to that point. So I'll switch that HDR off. Next, we have the grid. So on my phone, if you look at over here, you will see that I have a grid of 9 squares or rectangles on my image. And the reason for this is it allows me to use this to compose images. We think of the rule of thirds. Now, where you would switch that on is in your camera settings. In your settings, there is an option for a grid, so you can put that on. While we're in this, we can also look at different formats that we can shoot in. I use it as high efficiency because I have the software in order that will be able to help me go along with that, but most compatible works works fine. If you leave it in high efficiency and you do not edit, what can happen is when you email a photo from a phone, that the person looking with a PC or a Mac cannot actually see those images. Video, I always record at the highest quality video that I can. On this iPhone, I'm allowed to get to 60 frames a second and at 4K, which means it's a very high quality video. This allows me at a later stage to crop in to get to our full HD. Also, shooting at 60 frames a second means I can halve the speed without losing control, or without losing quality. So I actually can slow it down to half the speed to get that. But also within these, they have a section that gives you a slow-mo. So the slow-mo will only record at a HD or 1080 output, but it does 240 frames a second, which if we're working in video terms is 30 frames a second. We are looking at an 8 times slowing down, which is a great effect, and we're going to look at how this works in a little bit. And I always leave record stereo sound, I leave preserve settings on, and for all of us, especially now during COVID times, QR codes have become very important. All the restaurants we go to here in South Africa have QR codes. You now look at the menus on your phone rather than touching menus and passing all of these different things on to one another. Cool, let's move on from there. Then we have a thing called focus tapping. Now, these are the little things that are going to change the way you photograph with your phone. And I want you to think about this because it is so important. When I go on my screen, if I tap on a point, you will see a little block come up. This is telling me where I want to focus. So you can see I'm focusing on me right now. You can see the little square, or I can focus on the back. And what you will see is that the light changed according to where I put it, because it is not only focusing on the area, it is also looking at the light in that area. So it is getting the light correct for those different places, which leads us to the next slide, which is our exposure control. So by tapping, what I can do, there's a little sun on the side here that you'll be able to see. I'll put it up at the top here. If I drag down, it will darken the image. And if I drag up, it will lighten the image. So we then have complete control over our exposure within an image, which is massive, guys. This is painting with light. Just dragging a little slider up and down is the way that we can control how much light is coming into the phone. This is brilliant, beautiful, magnificent. Let's go on. Just remember, tap, look for the little sun and go up and down. Some of the phones might have a little plus minus button where you will be able to then also set that exposure. There are also extra camera apps that you're able to get. So for those of you who use Lightroom, you can get the Lightroom mobile app, which has a camera function inside it and gives you a far greater variety of settings that you can work with, very much similar to what you're doing on your cameras itself. Next in line, we have a focus lock or lock focus. The idea of this is to make sure that if somebody is standing in a point or the light needs to stay the same, if I tap and I hold it in, you will see it says AE lock, AE, auto exposure, auto focus lock. So even if I start going backwards here, it is still focused at this point where my hand is, not where my face is. So this is an important thing for something maybe like a bird coming in or a bird bath, something like that. So these are all funky little tricks. I use that a lot on panoramas so that I can choose the correct exposure and the correct place that I wish to lock my focus in. So we'll talk about panoramas in a bit too. And then digital zoom. On our phones, we have different options. So I'm going to change my back camera here, and you'll see that there's not a hell of a lot exciting going on there. But at the bottom here, I have a little 1x button, which is 1x zoom, or I can hit go to 2x, which is now doubling the zoom. Again, I can change where I want to focus. You can see how the focus changed from the cable in the front to the rhinos in the back. And I can change my exposure compensation. And obviously the back camera, the camera that looks away from the screen is always the best camera. The one looking at us does a job, but it's not there for high quality images. So you want to be taking as many things looking out so you can see what's happening on your screen too. So we have the 2x. On this camera, as soon as I go past 2x, I'm actually going to zoom this right in, and you can actually see just how digitized the edges of this photo are. Effectively, what we are doing with a digital zoom is we are cropping the image. We are no longer looking at the full image. So it's effectively me taking the photo at 2x because that's my optical zoom. And as soon as I go past that 2x, what ends up happening is I am effectively taking my image and just cutting pieces off and making it smaller. So you might as well take it at the 2x and then crop it afterwards, which preserves as much quality and gives you the ability to crop and change things should you wish to. So something to remember as we move forward. The other thing that these cameras are amazing at is macro photography. So as I was showing you now with the cables, those cables were quite close by. But we have an amazing ability to get quite close to things and to focus close to things, which gives us the option of taking photos of flowers, butterflies, should they sit still long enough, centipedes, millipedes, all of these different little critters. You can even get lens adapters that go over that, increase the ability to do macro, to do wide angle, maybe a bit of telephoto. Again, it's not going to give you a full DSLR's capability, but it's going to do a better job than just doing things the way they were done forever. So we have different camera modes. So again, we'll hop out of this and look at our phone. So there we have photo mode. So look at the bottom here. I'm going to move this guy right down here. We have photo mode. Very simple. It's taking a photo. I click the button. There I have a photo of me. I'm a bit mirrored now, but you get the idea. So photo takes photos. And there are ways that we can then hit the little down button up at the top. There's a little arrow button up top here. If you look up top, and this gives me a wide range of different things. I can switch my flash on and off. I can switch my live photo on and off. I can change the aspect ratio of my photograph should I wish to. I like it in 4:3 because that's how all of my photos come through, so I'll leave it at that. We can switch on a timer. So if we want to take a photo, like I'm out with the family, I can place the phone on something and we can put the timer to 10 seconds. Or if I really want to have fun, I put it at 3 seconds and see how fast I can run. And so that works very nicely. We also have these little color things where we can change the color profiles of the images to create different effects as we wish to do. I like a little black and white in me. There we go. And we have a black and white image. So we can change different functions to create more artistic looks as we're going along. I leave that set at original and I'll fiddle around with that at a later stage. And then again, I can switch my HDR on and off. So I'll leave that off for now. The next thing that we're going to look at is video function. So let's just get that slide going. So video is a different thing. Now, video is an important part of what we're doing on most things. It seems to be taking over a lot from photos. It seems to be taking over a lot from the way we're doing life in general, especially social media wise. And these cameras have incredible video quality. Like I said, it's got 4K 60 frames a second, which is a really, really high quality video. So within this, we've chosen our settings. Remember that the way this is now in a portrait fashion is not a great way to take long-term videos. If you want to play something back on a screen, just like you're looking at here, you can see only part of me on this aspect. But if I'm really playing with fire now. If I take this off and I turn this around and do this, it looks funny on your screen. But for me, it looks much better on mine. So if you're looking for long-term videos, please remember to change your aspect. Do not hold the phone upright. You're not talking to somebody on the phone. You have the ability then to turn the phone on its side and hold it with two hands like this. You will be more steady in the way you're taking the video, which will give you a huge opportunity to then take good videos. And then when you put it on your TV, you will have the whole TV filled with the video rather than just a portion as it is on the screen, as you can see it now. So think about that. Think about the way you're rolling out with that. On the video note, just remember that when you're taking videos, not to let videos run for 10 minutes. Take short snippets that you can edit together to create a nice video later. Doing long pieces means you have to look through lots of video to find the pieces you want, and I can promise you, you will not look back through them all that often. So short snippets, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, unless it's something crazy like animals chasing each other or things doing fun things, then go for it. But for the most part, if it's just a lion sitting there and grooming, you do not want more than about 10 seconds of it. It will drive you to drink to have to sit and watch another 2 hours of that. Or if you have to let your friends do that, you can feed them as much wine as you like. They're still going to get bored. Keep it short and sweet. Cool. Next on our list of things to do here, if my computer would just work with me, please. Hello. Is Panorama. Now, Panorama is a very, very, very cool tool. So Panorama, let me show my camera again, is all the way along, and it depends who you are and what you're doing. So I'm going to again take this off, and we're going to create a quick panorama of my amazing workstation here, and please excuse the mess. So what I would do is I'm going to hit the button, the start button, and you will see that there's a little arrow and a line. I've got to keep that arrow on the line. It's telling me to slow down because the light's not good. And we're going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And you can see it's pitch black here. You guys are enjoying afternoon. I should be sleeping. And then I push it again to stop the video. And what that gives me is this cool rendition of the entire scene. So panoramas work wonderfully to give us a very, very different view of life and to widen our thing, especially when we have landscapes, especially when we have people and things that we want to get together on this. Cool. I want to get to this now. Sorry, this is now coming loose as it would. So what we can do then is we're going to go on to different panoramas. And what a panorama is, like I say, it is a wider photo. It allows us a little bit more space to be able to take an image. So we're starting from left to right, or if we tap it, I'm going to go back to Pano here. And if I tap the top on this, I can actually turn it around to go from left to right rather than right to left. So this was a beautiful scene on one of our Madagascar adventures. We go through areas that are these huge open savannas. They used to be forest, but have been cleared out just for cattle grazing. But it opens this landscape up, these small little mountains in the background. And I use the road as a leading line to take you through the image all the way down. So think about your leading lines as we're going through this. We also have another example here of us at the gorillas. I'm actually heading off there on Thursday, first NatHab trip since all of this chaos began, so really excited about that. But you can have a lot of fun with a panorama image. And what we did here was we started on the right, and we said, okay guys, everyone pose, and you start taking the photo, and then you say, okay, everyone run, and everyone runs behind you to the other side, and you catch them as you're going around to the other side. And it just creates these funny, we're making images, we're making faces, we're doing silly things. And you can see the beautiful, windy, impenetrable national park, impenetrable forest behind us. Can't wait to go see my gorilla friends. And again, we then have different panoramas where we can turn the camera vertical. So we actually turn it in a landscape orientation. Now, instead of a portrait orientation, we turn it to landscape orientation and then do our pull from top to bottom, or bottom to top, or top to bottom. I recommend bottom to top because you can focus on the people there. And I used it a lot for creating images of baobabs, tall trees that you need to show how big they are and show scale and perspective. The next function we're going to look at is a function called portrait. Now, within portrait, I'll show you here first, we have two identical images, but what portrait does is the camera is actually creating a digital blur behind you, trying to mimic the effect of a very high quality portrait lens, which will have a very shallow depth of field. And what it does is it actually saves both of the images. So this is the same image, one without the blur in the background, and the second one with the blur. So it allows me to pop out a little bit more and look maybe a little better and hopefully a little bit more handsome. But I think I still need a bit of Photoshop. Again, here I have it here on the front camera. You can see the difference between portrait and not portrait. You can see just how much I pop out from the background with that artificial blur. Creates quite a nice image and feel. So I use that quite a bit with people, just trying to draw them out from the background and create very nice images. You can use it on animals, but the further you get away, the less it is able to distinguish that distance. And it will have a minimum distance that it can use. So think about that when you're taking the thing. It will actually say to you, move, subject needs to move. You need to be further away from your subject. You can change the different types of light. So there's studio light, we have contour light, we have stage light, where I'm now. Ooh, that's quite weird. We have stage light mono, and we have our high key image to just sort of pull all of these things out. So there's some fun effects that you could play with, but natural light works beautifully. So that's very cool. Next function we have is slow motion. Now, on the slow motion, I've shown you the setting that I used the last time, which is 240 frames a second. You go to slow-mo and you will click the button and take the video. What comes out is something like this. And Apple gives us, and I'm not sure if Android does the same thing, but it allows me to change the places that we're going. So we can see this little guy. Let's start him again. Boom. Nice and slow-mo. This is Untitled in Madagascar. Incredible place. These incredible sea fuckers get really close to us. Now, what I can do is I can choose the areas where I wish to start the jump. So I'm going to start it as he's about to launch. So instead of doing it where it was, I can actually shorten the time frame that it went. So let's do that. And now what it allows me to do is choose the area where I would like that to be. So you can fiddle with where you want the slow-mo to take effect. It works well with moving things, kids running, dogs running, animals moving, things like that. Just be aware. And as guides, I'm always saying, oh, it's going to do this, he's going to yawn or something like that. And you can then get ready to do those slow-mos and capture something completely different. Right, then we are going to hop to the next guy, which is our time lapse. So time lapse is a very, very cool function. What it does is it takes an image every 3 or 4 seconds, or 2, I think it's every second on this, and it'll take a photo, take a photo, take a photo, and then it puts it into a video format. And it creates long stop images, or videos. So effectively, you're taking a large chunk of time and shoving it into a smaller amount of time, which is fantastic for clouds moving, for water changing, for anything that's a dynamic situation. But clouds is a very good way of doing it. This was one that I did on a private trip with NatHab. We went on a photographic trip with one guest, and I shot a time lapse just holding my phone as we cruised through Madikwe, trying to show the speed and the movement and cram a bigger piece of safari into a smaller bit of time. Cool, so now let's look at something completely different. Shot composition. This is a very important part of what we're doing as our creation element within these beautiful settings and making these amazing images. So what is shot composition? It is arranging shapes within a frame to create a composition. We are impatient creatures. We don't want to go looking for things. And your brain tries to subconsciously gather the most information as quickly as possible by finding the most important parts of an image. A badly composed image basically means that your brain is taking too long to find the subject. So it's looking for what you're trying to show it, but you can't find it. And your brain turns off and goes away. A well-composed image directs the brain to the subject and helps the viewer's eyes through the image. So I'm going to show you again this, just a simple example of the blur. If you look at the blur, and I didn't notice that there was a tree growing out my head in the non-blurry image, but at least in the blurry image, it's blurred enough that you are more focused and more inclined to go straight to my face rather than be distracted by what's going on in the background, like the spears, like the arrow tip, the back of the arrows, the tree in the background there, all of this. Here, it's about the subject, not about the background. So think about your composition and how you're directing people through the image. Here's a cool image taken in a beautiful part of South Africa called Clarence. Right on the Drakensberg, and it was around April, May, and there's beautiful flowers called cosmos. It's an alien, but it's very pretty. And by using the road and getting low on the road, what I've done is I've taken the corners of the road and put them in the corner and created leading lines that are directing you and driving you straight towards this butte in the background, which is a little mountain. And you cannot go anywhere but look straight at that. Your eye is taken there because of composition. So think about how you're lining things up. So there are 4 different types of shot composition that we have to consider. that are going to change the way you photograph things. Perspective. Perspective is huge or little, but perspective is everything in photography. A low angle from down low looking up at something will make something look bigger or more superior, i.e. these giraffe fighting. So what I did was I held the phone out and clicked the thing from a lower angle, allowing their heads to stretch up into the sky, making them look as tall as what they are. We were very lucky that they were fighting literally next to the vehicle, which was kind of cool. Also, with buildings and cities, we're trying to show the magnitude of it. So this was my trip to New York again. And I didn't have space for a huge camera to be lugging around all the time. I wanted something on me that was easy to access. A high angle looking down on a subject increases the depth and makes the subject look smaller. So here's a great example of me at the Fish River Canyon in Namibia, and trying to show the magnitude of what we were looking down on. So by climbing higher up, a friend took a photo down towards me, and it showed just how big that canyon really is. It is the second largest canyon in the world after your Grand Canyon. And then we have a first-person point of view that puts the viewer in your place and makes them feel like they're experiencing what you're experiencing. So you would have seen a lot of people with their feet in a photo or their arms in a photo, because that gives you the same perspective. So here, as a photographer, this is again Anjajavi, and it was a magical sunset. 2 of my top 3 sunsets have been at this spot. And I was taking photos as the waves were washing out, and I wanted to give you the feel that you were behind the camera taking the image and staring out at this beautiful view. So the other thing with perspective is we're trying to give a reference of size, a better idea of size. It doesn't help me telling you that it's a dwarf chameleon and putting it on a leaf, because how big is the leaf? How long is a piece of string? We need something to have it relative to. So here is me holding a dwarf chameleon. You can see that it is tiny by the size relative to my hand. So that is the relativity thing. Here too, if we look carefully, there is a person hugging this tree. Look how freaking enormous that tree is. Without the person, where's your sense of reference? How do you know how big that tree is? So always think about perspective. Perspective, how can I show how big this is? By showing it with something that somebody has a sense of or a reference point to. The next thing we have is vantage point, a point of focus created by leading lines. Now, we've spoken about this in that image of the butte that I showed you earlier. Here is the Kazinga Channel, which I'm so excited to see next week. And this channel joins Lake George with Lake Edward, and we do the most magical boat cruise along this channel. It's about 2 hours, and I always tear through at least 1,000 photographs because the bird life is crazy. There's hippos and buffalo and elephant coming down to drink, and it's just putt-putt. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So the leading lines of the shore and the river draw you through that image. Other leading lines are the shadows of these ladies doing their yoga pose on the beach. They lead you into the image. The lines over here on the edge of the shore lead you in. This line on the edge of the horizon leads you to the center and to where these people are. And by putting the bright light right in the middle, our eyes are drawn to the brightest, the darkest places on an image. So you're trying to keep your subject light or silhouetted in this case. Other ideas of leading lines, this is in Madagascar, hiking up to a waterfall, and you can see that there's a path here which I'm using to lead you up to our subject, which again is giving you a perspective of the size of the forest and the trees and the beauty that is around her. And again, in Portugal, through a channel way, which again, anything like a road has this natural leading line that points as it's wider at you and gets further away and narrower. So it acts like an arrow pointing you through the image. Rule of thirds, breaking an image into thirds horizontally, both horizontally and vertically, creating 9 equal blocks. We spoke about this on the phone, that you can turn the grid on. Here's an example of me hiking with my son and my wife, following my instructions to the T to put me on the third. And as you can see, the little red dots here, these are what we call power spots. So we want a head or an eye or this main part of a subject at that point. And what that gives is it allows negative space behind, but not too much to distract the image, and not too little to feel like I'm going to fall out of the photo, and enough space, positive space in front to follow in. You will find me as the subject and then look out over the view that we're looking at. So using the rule of thirds allows that. It also allows us to create a more balanced image and to put more than one subject into it. So again, 1/3 bottom, 2/3 sky, 1/3 bottom, 2/3 sky, or 2/3 building. Rules are made to be broken, but you need to learn to use them and play around. Be creative, break the rule, look at it. If you don't like it, throw it away and don't try it again. But this was another great example of broken rules where we've split the image in two, but because of this, the reflection off the pool from the sky creates this very long, pretty image. Then dead space is made up of empty backgrounds, generally of the same simple color, and backgrounds are generally very far away. So here was an example of a friend of mine, Nick, and we were in Namibia, and it is the vastness of the desert, this very clean sky, and it just makes it feel huge. This could be done in the Serengeti when you have these endless plains, even in the Northwest where you guys have endless plains. And then creating frames, created by using objects in the foreground to focus and not allow the viewer's eyes to leave the photograph. So here, again, Uganda and Dali Lodge, looking down onto a crater lake in the bottom here. I used a door frame and the thatching above to frame the image and push you straight through there. You don't want to see what's on the side. You just want to look through the frame and go forward. So I hope that explains a bit. Kendall, I'm ready for some questions if you have one or two, please.
Great, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. If anyone has a question today, I just want to remind you, you can submit that in your control panel under the questions field. And in case anyone has to head out now, if you have any questions about any of our photography trips, if you're interested in that, you can find our contact information on the screen. Okay, first question, can you just repeat the name of that camera app that you prefer on iPhones?
So Lightroom Mobile, it's also an editing software that I use on my computer, but it's got a great array of different things. I can change shutter speeds, I can change my ISO, I have a little bit more professional control over my camera, but I must be honest, I use it very infrequently unless I'm really stuck at a point that I want to create something, but for the most part, the general camera app works wonderfully.
Mm-hmm. Great. So there were a few questions about HDR. So if you could provide a little bit more detail on smart HDR versus setting it up to manually select HDR, and why should you use HDR? When's a good time to use it?
Okay, let's try and get this nicely. So if we look at an image like this sky, where maybe we've got something a little better. So let's look at this image here. What HDR is going to do, it's going to look at two areas. Smart HDR does it on its own. It looks at the photo, takes the photo, fixes it for you, and you can store the original, which is a great option to take. But HDR is effectively looking at two things. Your very bright areas, like the sunshine here and these bright areas down here, and your very dark areas, the shadows within which the ladies are now because they're silhouetted. And what HDR does is it will overexpose the shadows, just the shadows, and it will underexpose the highlights and put them together so that you have the best dynamic range. So your range from the lightest point to the darkest point with as much detail in it as possible. So by setting it on your camera, you can switch it on and off. And the reason I like to switch it off and switch it on when I need it is because sometimes the images can look very artificial, where they might look too exposed and actually it looks funny, or the colors become too saturated and rich and vibrant, which actually looks unnatural. So I try and leave it off until I need it. I'll push it and go. Generally something with high dynamic range that I'm going to be taking, like a sunset or a sunrise, it's not running away from me. So I'm happy to push that button and do it, or take the photo and go, oh, there's not enough dynamic range. I'll use HDR for this one.
All right, great. And there were a lot of questions about macro, and so the people were just wondering if you could explain how to get to macro, one without using a macro lens. And let me see, there's another question here. You mentioned that macros take good, iPhones take good macro photos, and they just wanted an explanation on how to do that.
Sure thing. So effectively, I've opened up the computer again here. We've got our computer over computer over computer. That's quite cool, infinity phones. And what we're doing, what macro means is we're able to focus in on things that are very close up. So I'm going to go onto my hand here, and you can see that I'm focusing now on my fingerprints. So you can actually get the detail of my fingerprint. And if I tap the screen on the point that I wish to focus, it has a better chance of actually finding the focus. Or if I'm really close up to something like that, I can then choose it, etc., etc., etc. So all it means is that I can get really close to the object that I'm photographing and get the detail of it. That's what macro photography is. Beyond that, the macro lenses that you would put on here really just allow you to get a bit closer because of the optics. But all I'm talking about with macro is just getting close to things and getting detail within them, not having to photograph them from a far distance. It means that we can focus from a much closer distance.
Mm-hmm. Another popular topic was auto exposure and auto focus lock. Can you just explain that again?
Sure. So auto focus lock and auto exposure lock, if we try and, I'm going to open this guy again, and I'm going to zoom in on my rhinos here. If I go from what is quite a dark background and I focus in on them and lock that thing. So now we have auto exposure lock and auto focus lock. This is well exposed because it's looking at the dark picture that I've got behind everything here to hide a bit of my mess. Now, if I come across to the computer screen, it's not going to change the exposure. It's exposed for the darkness, not for this, not for the screen. This is too bright for it. Also, it's out of focus because of the idea that the focus is done to the picture, not to this closer computer screen. Vice versa, if I do it here, now you can see everything well exposed here. I can lock the auto exposure and focus, and if I move to my rhinos, they're now underexposed and out of focus. But it doesn't matter where I move along here, this will all, anything at that distance will still be in focus. Yeah.
Okay. There were a couple of people wondering about that leopard photo that you had in the intro and on the previous slide, and some people are wondering if that was taken with an iPhone.
Sorry, that was a background that was taken with the camera. The new cameras, the latest Androids and the latest iPhones have amazing cameras and amazing low light capability. And what you would do for a photo like that is use that exposure compensation and just underexpose. And you very possibly could get an image close to that, although it will probably be a little bit more grainy than that image just because of the size of the sensor you're working with.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting close to the top of the hour, so final question I'll take today. Someone's just wondering how you decide when to use your iPhone camera and when to use a normal camera.
Great question. Like I said in the beginning, the best camera in the world is the one you have on you at that point in time. I cannot carry my big cameras along with me everywhere. When I am out in the field and my big cameras are with me, I will very possibly use my phone for some video because it is very steady and very easy to use and quick to get to without me having to change other settings on my camera to get everything right. So I'll often use it for video. The chances of me using it for a photo opportunity on a safari when my big cameras are there are very few and far between, unless I'm doing a panorama, because again, that's a quick way of doing a big panorama without me having to take 10 images and then wait till I get home before I then put it on Lightroom and then stitch them all together to create it. So my first choice is always the bigger camera because it's got a bigger sensor, the lens quality is better, and it does a great job, or the best job. A phone will never replace a proper camera, but in the times that you need it, it's always there for you. So practice, get good at it. There's a lot of tutorials online to get used to these amazing things.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Well, Richard, really, this was wonderful. And I know you covered a lot of information. So for those watching who were hoping we could get Richard to repeat something he covered, just know that I'll have the replay available on our website later tonight, so you can rewatch this if you need to review anything. And for those interested in any of our photography trips, you can find our contact information on the screen. Give us a call or send us an email, and you can visit our website, of course, as well to review what options we have for you. Richard, I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you to all of you for watching today. It has been a pleasure to go into a different type of photography, a type of photography that we use more than our big cameras. So get used to it, get good at it. Thank you for NetHab for allowing us to share this knowledge and be with all of you on the Daily Dose. And thank you, Kendall, for hosting.
Great. Thanks again, Rich. And we will see you and Matt tomorrow for another webinar. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow with Matt and Rich for our next Daily Dose. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nethab.com/webinars. And again, we did record today's presentation, so we'll have the replay available on our website later tonight. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, guys.